Open part of the debate, and before I call Bruce Crawford, I'm going to call Graham Simpson to open on behalf of the Delegated Powers and Law Reform Committee. Graham Simpson.
Thank you. I am speaking as a convener. Like the EU Withdrawal Bill, this bill confers wide powers on ministers and consequently is of great interest to my committee. The tight timetable for considering this bill has imposed significant restrictions on the ability of the committee to apply thorough scrutiny to this bill, and as convener, I find that unacceptable. But we all take our jobs seriously, and my fellow committee members, my impressive Deputy Convener Stuart McMillan, Alison Harris, David Torrance and the ever-entertaining Neil Finlay, will do it as thoroughly as the limited time allows. The committee took evidence on the delegated powers in the bill from the Minister yesterday at its meeting. We sought to answer the questions that we always seek to answer on all bills. Is it appropriate to confer these powers on the Scottish ministers? Are the powers appropriately framed? Do the powers match the policy intention as expressed in the Delegated Powers Memorandum? And are the powers subject to an appropriate level of parliamentary scrutiny? Now, having taken that evidence, the committee agreed to draw a number of the powers to the attention of the Parliament and wrote to you, Presiding Officer, this morning. Normally, we'd do a detailed report, as we did with the UK bill, and that's what should be happening here. I'm not going to cover all the powers mentioned in that letter, but I want to highlight some of them. In some of the cases, it is to welcome how the Scottish Government has responded to concerns the committee had about similar powers in the EU Withdrawal Bill. In other cases, it is to note the Government's intention to bring forward amendments to respond to concerns raised by the committee. There's a remaining category of significant powers which I want to draw to the Parliament's attention. Firstly, Section 11 of the bill confers a wide power on the Scottish ministers to correct failures of retained EU law, to operate effectively, and also to correct deficiencies in retained devolved EU law. The committee has already considered evidence in connection with similar powers in the European Union Withdrawal Bill. In its report on that bill, the committee concluded that, quotes, the powers should only be available where ministers can show that it's necessary to make a change to the statute book, even if they cannot show that the particular alternative chosen is itself necessary. The committee therefore welcomes that this bill has restricted ministers' powers to making changes that are necessary rather than appropriate. Section 13(1) is described as a power to make provision corresponding to EU law after exit day. The Government's Delegated Powers Memorandum describes the power as giving, quotes, Scottish ministers the ability to ensure that, where appropriate, devolved law in Scotland keeps pace with post-withdrawal developments in EU law. Now that's a very significant power and would potentially allow delegated powers to be used for a wide range of circumstances that may otherwise be considered appropriate to be done by primary legislation. The committee queried whether this power was appropriate to the purposes of this particular bill. We also queried whether there was the same urgent need for such a power, and therefore whether it was appropriate to include such a power within a bill being treated as an emergency bill. The Minister said this power had been included in the bill in response to concerns raised by stakeholders, and that he'd been surprised that a similar power had not been included in the European Union Withdrawal Bill. He explained that this power was needed for practical reasons to ensure that, where appropriate, certain areas of law could keep pace with EU law. The Minister suggested that environmental law and food safety law were areas in which there may be a desire to use this power to keep pace with EU law. In his view, this power was appropriate for inclusion. The committee has not taken a definitive view on this. The bill allows the Scottish ministers to set an exit day by regulations. The power does not provide any limits on the date that can be fixed. I asked the Minister why the bill does not just say that exit day is the day the UK leaves the EU, since that is the factual situation. He said the power would not be used to set a different exit day, but pledged to amend the bill in response to that point, and that is to be welcomed. Finally, in addition to exploring the delegated powers in the bill, the committee also asked the Minister and his officials for a legal explanation as to why the bill had to be subject to the emergency procedure. The Minister committed to providing that explanation. The committee has not had the opportunity to consider that response yet. We will follow the progress of the bill over the next 2 weeks, but we should have had longer.
Thank you. I now call on Bruce.